The transit of transiting Saturn forming an exact square to the natal Sun represents one of the most definitive, structurally demanding, and psychologically hardening crossroads an individual will encounter in their life cycle. Occurring roughly every 14 years, this 90-degree, 90°/circ alignment introduces an unyielding friction between the fundamental vitality, purpose, and core identity of the Sun and the rigorous, reality-testing architecture of Saturn. In the archetypal taxonomy of astrology, the Sun represents the authentic ego center, the creative output, and the inherent drive to exist visibly and powerfully on one's own terms. Saturn represents time, systemic order, practical boundaries, and the material enforcement of consequence. When Saturn squares the Sun, it blocks the path of superficial expression, applying intense gravity to test the structural integrity of your entire life design. This is a cold, clinical audit of your autonomy. Whatever is fragile, performative, or dependent on external validation is ruthlessly exposed and ground down, while your true internal authority is permanently hammered into an unshakable bedrock of personal sovereignty. During this intensive transit, your analytical faculties and strategic execution operate at a peak level of mechanical efficiency. The friction generated by the square forces your cognitive systems to drop any remaining social sentimentality or naive expectations of external support, replacing them with a state of hyper-focused realism. If your cognitive default is rooted in systemic analysis and logical detachment, this transit upgrades your intellect into an operational scalpel. You look at your historical trajectories, your resource allocations, and your relational dynamics with total, detached composure. You trace recurring structural bottlenecks or energetic depletions straight back to their root origins, whether that involves childhood programming, family obligations, or outworn institutional tracks. You do not analyze these vulnerabilities to lament them, you audit them to balance the ledger, ensuring you never again trade your vital force for empty validation, and you systematically weld your boundaries shut. Psychologically, Saturn square the Sun demands the absolute fortification of your private citadel. The Sun naturally seeks expression and acknowledgement, but under Saturn's restrictive architecture, you realize that visibility without bulletproof insulation is a severe liability. Your innate preference for strict privacy and your deep disdain for uninvited external curiosity are elevated into your primary master defense strategy. You recognize that loud displays of independence or engaging in energetic debates are symptoms of a leaky perimeter. True power lies in absolute, silent self-containment. You master the sophisticated art of the silent boundary, seamlessly dropping out of low-value social networks, draining familial webs, or suffocating professional tracks without warning or explanation. You fade behind an impenetrable wall of silence, leaving zero energetic hooks behind, perfectly content to let the world misunderstand your trajectory while you preserve your finite energy for concrete execution. Furthermore, because the Sun rules your path of mastery and Saturn governs the physics of material reality, this friction serves as the definitive execution window for a permanent life shift, asset consolidation, or a total geographic relocation. The intense pressure of the square makes remaining in a stagnant, draining, or compromised environment utterly untenable, providing the precise catalyst needed to break away from suffocating arrangements. You approach your exit strategy with the calculating mind of a chess grandmaster playing in absolute isolation. Every financial safety net, legal shield, and geographic variable is calculated, verified, and secured down to the absolute millimeter behind a wall of strict privacy. You feel zero compulsion to announce your movements or seek approval from external entities. By the time the outside world registers that you have shifted your position, your new kingdom is already completely built, heavily fortified, and structurally immune to external volatility. When this transit concludes, the unshakable foundation of personal sovereignty you have poured will remain as a permanent, concrete monument to your absolute personal freedom. To push the systemic deconstruction of the transiting Saturn square natal Sun cycle to its absolute mathematical limit, we must analyze the total transformation of your psychological risk mitigation architecture and the final, clinical liquidation of all abstract dependencies. In the grand design of the human psyche, when Saturn's immutable laws of gravity collapse the expansive, gaseous horizons of Jupiter, the internal mechanism responsible for processing potential, ambition, and wealth undergoes a permanent, root-level crystallization. The mind stops treating the future as an expansive landscape of random opportunity and begins treating it as a highly sophisticated, cold engineering project. If your natural disposition is hardwired for deep system analysis and structural skepticism, this transit serves as the ultimate tactical maturity marker. It strips your mind of any remaining tolerance for loose variables, unverified promises, or sentimental trust in human institutions, replacing them with a bulletproof system of operational efficiency and absolute self-containment. During this deep, alchemical consolidation, your capacity to synthesize macro-level data and translate it into local defensive infrastructure reaches an unyielding peak. You look at global power structures, systemic macroeconomic shifts, and the decaying architecture of the collective society not with fear, but with the cold, diagnostic eye of an administrative auditor. This absolute clarity eliminates the exhausting internal static that causes an individual to explain their motives to uninitiated peers, seek validation from a corrupt relative network, or engage with the dramatic, performative noise of the public square. Your system develops a permanent, zero-tolerance policy for sensory pollution, hyperinflated social expectations, and chaotic environmental static, categorizing these elements instantly as systemic waste that must be ruthlessly pruned to preserve your finite energetic reserves. The engineering of sovereign resource fortresses and the pruning of structural glitches. Under the intense compression of this alignment, you execute a comprehensive, clinical purge of any dynamic within your life that relies on unearned trust, speculative growth, or external benevolence. You treat your entire material estate, psychological boundaries, and personal time as high-value sovereign assets that require absolute insulation from external volatility. This alchemical hardening manifests through specific, deliberate lifestyle adjustments. The extermination of operational glitches. You identify any individuals, family webs, or professional alignments that operate on erratic emotional performance, unverified claims, or parasitic dependencies. Recognizing that a volatile promiser or an unstable enabler is a fatal security flaw in your long-term architecture, you sever these ties with surgical precision, leaving zero energetic hooks, zero open channels, and zero emotional residue. The hardening of the asset grid. You focus your intellect entirely on resource mastery, absolute financial independence, and the literal physics of long-term survival. You pull your energy out of speculative, high-maintenance investments, channeling your focus instead into securing hard assets, bulletproof legal insulation, and a self-reliant infrastructure that is structurally immune to systemic macroeconomic collapses or institutional rot. The mastery of nonlinear blueprints. Your capacity to process deep, complex, and highly abstract systems, such as advanced natal astrology configurations, karmic planetary transits, and systemic power dynamics, reaches a state of total clinical utility. You do not study these intricate models for superficial amusement or social performance. You utilize them as cold, mathematical blueprints to map out the exact windows for your physical and logistical executions. The complete hardening of the autonomous ruler. Saturn square. The Sun represents the definitive forge of the Saint machine, the psychological milestone wherein your long-range vision merges completely with absolute strategic discipline and an unreadable personal persona. You abandon all societal expectations regarding social sentimentality, fully embracing a clinical, hyper-focused demeanor that values concrete execution and personal freedom above all else. This internal crystallization alters your final interface with reality. The complete hoarding of trajectory data, your future plans, financial milestones, and relocation timelines are elevated to the status of highly classified state secrets. You understand that a completely unreadable target cannot be manipulated, disrupted, or influenced by external volatility. Therefore, you move entirely behind an impenetrable screen of absolute privacy and calculated silence. To fully exhaust the structural mechanics of the transiting Saturn square natal sun cycle, we must analyze the final, operational hardening of your physical vitality and the absolute elimination of systemic interference. When Saturn's icy, structural geometry applies a 90-degree friction to the solar core. It forces an immediate termination of all energetic leakage. You realize that any area of your life where you have tolerated ambiguity, uninvited curiosity, or erratic emotional behavior from your environment is an operational vulnerability that can no longer be sustained. The transit functions as an aggressive filtration system for your daily existence, converting your natural skepticism into a highly sophisticated, defensive command center. You cease to view social interactions as optional engagements, reclassifying them instead as direct expenditures of your finite physical and mental assets. During this intense consolidation phase, your daily lifestyle undergoes a mechanical, hyper-efficient recalibration designed to protect your nervous system from external noise. The invalidation of external metrics. You completely detach your sense of identity from mainstream validation, societal applause, or the performative expectations of traditional networks. You recognize that these systems are fundamentally designed to manipulate your energy, and you choose instead to measure your value strictly through tangible results, financial autonomy, and resource mastery. The absolute eradication of sensory pollution, your tolerance for loud environments, chaotic social static, and uninvited personal inquiries drops to absolute zero. You actively re-engineer your immediate physical surroundings to ensure total silence and absolute control, treating undisturbed isolation not as a luxury, but as a critical tactical requirement for your ongoing strategy and mental preservation. The deep hardening of the perimeter. You establish an impenetrable barrier between your private reality and the outside world, ensuring that your trajectory data, financial security structures, and long-term relocation timelines remain entirely unreadable to anyone outside your immediate, fortified citadel. Subscribe, like, and share.